There are currently 170 League of Legends champions in Arena, and I have played every single one of them. If I were to spend a minute talking about each one, this video would be about 3 hours long. In order to prevent that and make this video more manageable for everyone, I'll be breaking up the champions into the categories that League has set up for Arena. In this video, we'll be talking about the Assassins. Now, Assassins in general are kind of weird, where they're bad because everyone is more tanky due to the Arena stat adjustments, but they have several items and augments which make them absolutely ridiculous. In fact, we're going to start off the tier list by talking about specific augments which can break this class into the OP tiers. And the first we're going to talk about is Executioner. And Executioner, what it does is that you deal 50% increased damage to enemies below 50% of their maximum health, and Assassins want to be bringing opponents to lower health totals as fast as possible, and getting this 15% increased damage is really, really nice for them. Also, on top of that, when they get takedowns, it resets all of the cooldowns of their basic abilities, which Assassins really, really do want. The next augment I think is really good on every single class, but Assassins especially love Contract Killer because they are designed usually to shut down one person, and with Contract Killer being able to do 15% more damage to that one person and also snowball by getting more gold is super duper nice. Now the next obvious augment, which is really strong on Assassins, is Jeweled Gauntlet. And Assassins just want to be dealing a ton of damage, and once you give Assassins the ability to critically strike with all of their abilities, then it is absolutely incredible, and it really puts Assassins into a whole new level, which is hard to deal with. Another augment that I will add that is especially good on Assassins is Ultimate Revolution, which refreshes your ult cooldown, because usually Assassins have very powerful ultimates, so being able to use it twice is very, very nice. Finally, I find Assassins to be the best users of Earthquake because it has 100% bonus AD scaling, and usually Assassins are the champions who are able to build a lot of AD and utilize how potent Earthquake can be. There also are just a lot of dashes on Assassin champions, so Earthquake is especially good on these champions and can help you win a run simply because you are able to hit this augment, and that same thing applies to all of these augments. So if you're an assassin and are able to choose one of these augments, then your champion is just simply going to be a lot better. Now let's quickly talk about some items that are especially good on Assassins, and the first is going to be Axiom Arc, because as we mentioned before, they're very good with their ultimate, and in Arena, Axiom Arc gives your ultimate 20% more damage, which is especially good on these champions. The next item that is really good, especially for Assassins, is Prowler's Claw, as it gives you another active dash, and it gives you more damage to that target for a short period of time after you use that dash, which is really nice to pump out a bunch of burst. Duskblade is also OP on Assassins, as it just gives all of your abilities more damage, and Assassins are usually rather ability reliant. And finally, Regicide is an interesting scaling option for Assassins, because if you're able to get a takedown on somebody who has a special mark, you gain permanent 10 bonus attack damage, and it also kind of gives you Ultimate Revolution on an item, as it resets your ult cooldown, which is just really, really incredible for Assassins. Now, the last point I'm going to say about rating the champions is that in Arena, almost every single champion has some stat adjustments on top of the already existing Arena stat adjustments, where every champion is just a bit tankier in general, because everybody has more health, which is why Assassins are a bit weaker. But anyways, we're going to be looking at those while we rate the champion, as they're quite important. Now, the advantage that Akali gets is that she just gains more health, her Q does more damage overall. The really nice change is that her W's cooldown is halved, as it used to be 20 seconds, and now it goes down all the way to 10 seconds, which is a very good change for her, because she super duper needs the energy restoration, because before they had these buffs for Akali, she was actually, in my opinion, one of the worst champions in all of Arena, as you would just run out of energy before you finish anybody off, making her absolutely terrible. But now she can actually get some of that energy regen back because her W has a cooldown that makes it usable in this game mode. I'm gonna put Akali in the Squishies Reliant tier. If she didn't have all of these buffs, she would definitely be in the bad tier. But if you're a good Akali player, you can actually pop off and finish off some squishy people. The only problem is she really, really does struggle against pretty tanky bruisers or tanks, as she can simply just run out of energy once again, and if people just have too much sustain or too much natural tankiness, she's not my favorite champion to play. The next champion we're going to look at is Ekko, and Ekko, he's an okay champion. It kind of ends up being that you just aren't like that tanky if you want to build him tanky. He doesn't do the most damage if you want to build damage. So I believe the AP mage assassins can kind of struggle. So he's going to be in the Met tier. He's absolutely ridiculous with Jeweled Gauntlet. He's absolutely ridiculous with Earthquake. And he has other augments that are really good on him. Like anything that lowers his E cooldown is pretty good. And there are some interesting builds you can go on Ekko, which applies to a lot of champions. But just for the champion himself, I'm going to put him in the med tier. Now, Elise is an interesting champion because there are no changes listed for her here, but I know for a fact she does feel a little bit stronger than her Summoner Rift counterpart. She can absolutely pop people if you play her right. I'm kind of tempted to put her in the OP of experience tier, but honestly, the times where I'm losing to Elise, it does feel more like she's high-rolling certain augments. And if you don't really hit those augments, or if you're playing like more tankier champions, Elise can feel a little lackluster. So for assassins, I'm gonna put her in the med tier. I could definitely see people disagreeing with me, but if you don't hit certain conditions, I do feel like Elise can be quite lackluster. Evelyn is another champion that when Arena first came out, she was absolutely terrible. I mean, it makes sense. She kind of revolves around not being seen by wards and stuff like that, but that's just not a mechanic in the game. So they gave her a bunch of buffs, and all these changes are really nice and helped Evelyn go from a champion that was absolutely terrible to a champion that can be quite good. Now, Evelyn's a really interesting champion because she is really good with a bunch of augments. Like any augment that constantly wants you to be casting spells like Phenomenal Evil or Vulnerability, she could be quite good with stuff like that. And originally I was going to put her in the OP of experience tier because if you're good with Evelyn, I can definitely see her pop off. But they did actually recently nerf her in these upcoming patch notes, which are going to be releasing tomorrow. And for that reason, I'm going to put her down into the Squishies Reliant tier. Because Evelyn, when she did hit these like breakpoints, like for instance Chain Lightning is another really good augment on her, she was an absolute menace. But now that she's getting nerfed, I feel like if you do play tanks, you're going to be able to survive an assassin like Evelyn. So she's going to definitely do better against squishies in general, or she's going to be quite augment reliant. And if she isn't hitting those things, she's going to struggle. Fizz is an absolutely annoying champion. He always has been. Honestly, I'm going to put him in the meh tier. He might be one of the best Earthquake users in the entire game. And of course, he's great with Jeweled Gauntlet, but that is applicable to all assassins. And it's not really quite fair to rate a champion being busted only if they hit busted augments. So on average, Fizz kind of ends up feeling meh, because he isn't too easily able to pop squishies. As again, I believe the mage assassin items just feel a little bit lackluster with everybody being more tanky. Kassadin is an absolute late game menace, so it's a bit weird where you have this champion that in the early game in Summoner's Rift really sucks, but he has to be kind of clickable in the early game if you want to play him in Arena. And Kassadin, he feels alright, but only really against squishy people. He has so much mobility where it is hard to kite him, but if you are able to blow him up, he doesn't really do that much. Again, he can struggle quite heavily against tanks because he doesn't have any percent health damage. Again, amazing with Earthquake with his ultimates constantly popping off. He's really good with Polymorph Prismatic Augment because then when you're ulting on top of people, they're actually getting CC'd, which is quite nice. His early game still can feel kind of lackluster compared to other champions. He is super duper ult reliant. So against the right enemy team comps, he can do alright, but if you build like any semblance of MR against him, he can really struggle. Katarina is one of the best hybrid building champions in the game. Katarina, like a lot of the assassins, has been buffed quite heavily, and honestly, she's going into the augment / item insta-win. There are just so many augments that increase both your AP and AD at once. And honestly, I'm just going to be listing a bunch of augments here that are really good with her. One thing I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure she would benefit from something like a vulnerability, as her ultimate is a damage over time effect, I think, the way League works. Not 100% sure on that. But considering that her ultimate and her daggers already apply on hits, but there are already just so many augments that buff on hits that Katarina can so easily use them and absolutely pop off. She's by far the best user of Master of Duality because as she's ulting, she's getting both AP and AD because it counts as basic attacks because they are on hits. And then everything that she's going to be doing is just going to be doing a billion damage. She's really good with Marks Mage, for instance, because again, her ultimate procs on hits. just because there are just so many augments and items that make Katarina really, really good, I'm going to put her in this tier. Next champion we're going to look at is Khazix, who has had all of his abilities buffed. Honestly, Khazix has received so many buffs, but I'm still kind of going to put him in the squishies reliant tier, because if you're able to group up, he just does way less damage, and he just doesn't really do anything against tanks because he doesn't have any percent health damage. He is super duper strong against squishies, but besides that, he does feel kind of lackluster. He can also be kind of like peeled against because his play style is kind of linear, where he wants to jump on top of you and you kind of know where he's coming from. It's kind of rare where he's going to be like flanking you. I'm going to point out that Khazix Mordekaiser can be a very potent combo where Mordekaiser ults one person and then Khazix will have isolated damage against the other target because they are by themselves. And that combo is definitely OP if you're experienced with it. But just in general, I'm going to put him in the squishies reliant tier. And the reason why I'm going to put him lower than these is because I do think there are less good AD augments for him to use. I think there are better AD items, but when it comes to augments, he can feel a little lackluster, and he doesn't benefit from something like Axiom Arc, as his ultimate itself doesn't do any bonus damage. Leblanc is a champion with also a lot of buffs. Now, the buffs to Leblanc are nice, but nothing to make her that special. That being said, I'm going to put her in the squishies reliant tier at the top of it because she is really good against squishies. And the fact that she is so mobile and so good at getting in and out with her W cooldown being reduced, she's just a little bit more potent and annoying than a lot of champions that are up here. She has pretty safe combos where she can like try to poke before she has to go all in, while a lot of these champions kind of need to go all in all at once and hope that that is enough to win the fight, while LeBlanc can play a little bit more safe, play a little bit more of an extended fight, which does really benefit her in Arena. Master Yi is a bit of a weird champion to have in the Assassins tier list. He kind of more belongs in Fighters or Marksmen, but I'm going to have him here because Riot Games has included him in the Assassin tier, and I just want to be consistent. That being said, I do believe he's the first Assassin that might actually be nerfed. Now, if you've ever wondered if Assassins might be a bit weak in Arena, I think this is pretty good proof, where the only champion that doesn't really fit the Assassin tier has, instead of being buffed in every single category, has been nerfed in every single category. That being said, I still think he belongs in the augment/item insta-win category. There's just so many augments that buff on hits, and there's so many items that are really good with on hits, which is why Master Yi has to receive these nerfs, because otherwise he would be just way too OP and would be the only champion, kind of spoilers, that belongs in the OP tier for Assassins. But I think with these nerfs, he can actually feel a bit lackluster if you're not hitting these high highs. He can feel a little underwhelming if you do just end up getting CC'd a bunch. So he's going to be second for now, only under Katarina, just because I think Katarina's high highs are a bit better than Master Yi's high highs. Naafiri's a bit of a weird champion to rate because, first of all, I never really played Naafiri that much. I did play her in Arena at least once. I have played against her a bunch of times. But she is just now receiving an entire rework, which I have definitely not played in Arena. So I guess you could say, technically this is the one champion I have not played yet in Arena because of all of the changes. That being said, if the changes are decent on her, then I think she's going to be pretty good in Arena. What I like about Naafiri is that she's an assassin that can build like fighter items if need be, like something like Eclipse is pretty good on her. She can go like for a more bruiser playstyle if you really need. And just having that versatility is super duper nice. She also has a lot of lock on, which is really nice because there can be a bit less setup in Arena and people are more anticipating you trying to make plays, so it's a bit easier for them to actually outplay you. But it is kind of hard to outplay a Naafiri if all of her abilities are pretty much lock on. That being said, this is definitely going to be the one rating I'm the least confident on, just because she is going to be changing so much. But I do believe that if you're really good on Naafiri, she can be quite strong because of her possible versatility. Nidalee is an interesting assassin because she can also kind of be played as a poke mage, and like Katarina, she has a lot of dual scaling. I'm actually going to end up putting Nidalee in the bad tier. She's kind of awkward where she wants to be like throwing her javelins and winning that way, but if the enemies are able to get on top of her, she doesn't really have the same escapes that I feel like a lot of the other assassins actually have. Her W pounce just isn't the most mobility, where it is kind of easy to run her down. She also doesn't have the same amount of burst, considering that every other champion is more tanky. She's definitely like an interesting champion, and she's fun to play. She would be pretty good with the Prismatic Augment where you get scaling AD and AP, but in the late game, I just feel like she gets absolutely blown up before she has a chance to really do anything. And for that reason, I'm going to put her in the bad category. I definitely think she is playable if you're really good in Nidalee, but if you're like first timing her or like don't really have that much experience, I think you're really going to struggle with this champion. Qiyanna is another champion that I think if you're really good at her, she can absolutely excel. And honestly, I'm just going to put her right up into OP if experienced here. She's probably one of the best users of Axiom Arc, of Prowler's Claw, of Duskblade, even of Regicide. She just does so much AD damage if played well. There's been many times where I've just been absolutely one-shot by a Qiyanna if she plays really well. She can also one-shot you and your teammate if she gets both of you guys into the wall. And because she can absolutely blow up 2 people, I do think she's a bit of a better assassin than a lot of the other champions we've talked about, because those usually rely on just finishing off one person, while Qiyanna has the potential to be doing a lot of AoE. But you do have to play her really, really well, and you kind of have to rely on your opponents, maybe making a few mistakes. But if those conditions are met, she has some really high highs. Next up, we're going to talk about Rengar, who definitely has received some changes. I do think Rengar kind of sucks as an assassin. Why Rengar is really good in Summer's Rift is like you're usually kind of trying to rely on getting a lead, which then helps you win the game. If you're playing Rengar at a balanced state against another champion, usually the Rengar is not going to do that well. He doesn't do anything special really against tanky champions. They can kind of just ignore him. That being said, if he does hit some of the OP things, of course he's really good. He's really, really strong with Earthquake if you are able to play around a bush, because he can constantly proc it. But again, there are some maps also that just have really bad bush placements, so the enemies don't play around those bushes. One of the big elements of his kit can also feel lackluster. So Rengar, kind of an awkward assassin to play and can feel quite lackluster, especially if you don't have that much experience on the champion. Shaco has to be one of the most annoying arena champions, and he actually has some changes to him, which try to make the champion a little bit more bearable. Even though this champion has received several nerfs, he is still very augment / item insta-win capable, because he's so good at proccing Liandry's, which is one of the best items in the game, even though it's been nerfed so many times. He's good with like any of the burn augments. He can use so many of the augments so well. He is just so slippery. He is very frustrating to play against. Sometimes you'll play Shaco and feel absolutely useless, where you'll be like, maybe this champion is bad. But then there are some games where you just have these perfect conditions on the champion, where he is just so annoying, and one of the reasons why so many people actually ban him, me included sometimes, because you just don't want to have to play against a Shaco with like for instance, like Bread and Jam, where his W cooldown becomes almost nothing, because then the entire map becomes a minefield of absolute misery. Talon is another champion that looks like he's received buffs on all of his abilities. With all the buffs, especially the one to his passive, giving him so much AD scaling, I'm going to put him into the OP if experienced tier, either above Qiyanna or below. I'm actually going to put him below just because Qiyanna has like CC potential on top of her damage, which is really, really nice for like setting up your teammate, for instance, where all of the other assassins really struggle with setting up your teammate except for Qiyanna pretty much. He just does so much damage. He uses all of these items super duper well, and I think they are very, very strong, and you will see some games where Talon is absolutely popping off. I do think, once again, like all other assassins, he can really struggle against certain bruisers, against certain tanks, which is why he's not going into the OP tier. The last assassin we have, which is an absolute classic one, is Zed, and he only has 2 changes to his Q and to his W. I'm going to put Zed in the OP if experienced tier. I'd put him higher if he'd had a bit more buffs, but they were pretty conservative with Zed, and which makes sense because it can be very frustrating to play against in arena. If Zed is powerful, his whole kit is designed around just pumping a bunch of damage on one person. So if he's a meta champion, that means that usually one person on your team is kind of going to end up not being able to play the game. One thing he really struggles against is Zhonya's, because you can prevent his ult Mark from popping, which is a huge nerf to Zed. You can also just end up building armor against him, and for that reason, he really struggles against a lot of tanks. He's probably one of the best assassins against squishies, and I do see him having potential to build kind of bruisery if need be in order to like outplay tanks, but usually he is going to struggle against them. Now that completes my assassin tier list for Arena. feel free to let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I will say that assassins used to be better in Arena when the revive mechanic didn't exist, because if you popped one person, they were out of the fight forever. But if their teammate is like a tank and is able to revive that person, then it kind of can suck, especially if like the assassins don't have cooldowns anymore, such as a really powerful ultimate. So that is definitely one thing that hurt assassins, and I do think they are a bit weaker in general, which is why so many of them have all of their abilities buffed. Because even though you would think in a game mode that revolves around only 2 people and there's a class of characters that are so good at popping one person, just because everybody's so much tankier with arena stat adjustments, everybody just has more health, champions that don't do % health damage are really going to struggle, which pretty much categorizes all of the assassins. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. The next tier list I'll be working on is the fighters in Arena, which is going to take longer as there just are more fighters. But if you're excited to see that, make sure to subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed this one, and once again, thanks for watching, and best of luck on your Arena adventures.